The dynasty of Italian bankers, the Medici, ruled the Florentine Republic and later the Grand Duchy of Tuscany, with only brief interruptions from 1434 to 1737. Over those centuries, they produced 4 popes of Rome, 2 queens of France, transformed the world's banking system forever, and reshaped the architecture of Florence. But the greater their power grew, the more resentment they stirred. When Clement VII, the second Medici pope, died, Rome met the news not with mourning, but with glee. For several nights after his funeral, crowds broke into St. Peter's Basilica, leaving insults and even filth upon his tomb. In this episode of Buried Memories, we'll explore how the Medici perfected banking, conquered Florence, Rome, and a handful of other European capitals, became the most celebrated patrons of the arts in history, and rose to the highest ranks of the church, and why this provoked such deep anger among the faithful. Giovanni di Bicci's bank. Although family legend traced the Medici lineage back to a knight of Charlemagne's era named Averardo, their true origins were far from noble. The earliest Medici were merchants and money changers who made their fortune in currency exchange. By the 10th century, they had settled in Florence, near the Old Market and the Church of San Lorenzo. The city was thriving. Trade, finance, and the stability of the florin currency were fueling rapid growth. But banking in those days was a perilous trade. Moneylenders who profited from charging interest were denied church sacraments and Christian burial. They could be excommunicated, their wills declared invalid. To sidestep these bans, bankers disguised interest charges as differences in currency exchange rates. In the 1340s, Europe was struck by an economic crisis. The biggest debtor to Florence's banks, King Edward III of England, refused to repay his loans. One by one, the city's largest banks collapsed. Into this vacuum stepped the Medici. In 1397, Giovanni di Bicci founded a bank as a joint stock company, keeping the controlling share for himself. Profitable investments in textile manufacturing and trade with the East secured a steady income. The bank introduced a system that revolutionized financial transactions, a model that, in increasingly complex forms, still operates today. The Medici pioneered cashless settlements through a process of mutual clearing. Instead of handling numerous individual payments, each client made a single final entry, positive or negative. To avoid accusations of usury, loans were disguised as bill of exchange transactions, with the interest hidden in the bill's value. This required a far-reaching network, and the Medici Bank became one of the first true international banks, with branches in Rome, Venice, London, Bruges, Avignon, and other key cities. To shield their enterprise from church persecution. In 1402, Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici lent 10,000 ducats to secure a cardinal's title for his friend Baldassare Casa. When Casa was elected Pope John XXIII, the Medici became the official bankers of the Holy See, an honor that brought them a stream of high-ranking clients. However, just 5 years later, This pope was deposed and would later be regarded as an anti-pope. If you wish to live in peace in matters of state, take only the part to which the law and the consent of your fellow citizens entitle you, the 69-year-old Giovanni de' Bicci advised his heirs shortly before his death. He left them a fortune of 180,000 florins. Sadly, no one on our creative team is a wealthy Medici heir, which is why your support matters. If you're enjoying this story, give this video a like, and if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, now's a good time. Cosimo de' Medici and the most beautiful city. Florence was a republic governed by the Signoria, a committee of 9 elected members, led for 2 months at a time by the gonfaloniere of justice. Any attempt to concentrate power in one's own hands was met with accusations of tyranny. This was exactly the charge leveled by the rival Albizzi family against Cosimo, son of Giovanni, forcing him into exile. Before departing for Venice, however, Cosimo managed to transfer the bank's funds to its Rome and Venice branches and hide clients' valuables in monasteries, where retrieving them without provoking a scandal with the Pope would be impossible. The capital flight weakened Florence, and within a year, Cosimo returned in triumph. From then on, Cosimo avoided holding official positions himself, but quietly placed his allies in key roles. He dealt with opponents through crushing taxes, a policy the common people welcomed. His rivals went bankrupt, lost their property, and Medici agents bought it up at bargain prices. Cosimo believed usury to be a mortal sin. Pope Eugene IV advised him to ease his conscience through acts of charity. So, Cosimo funded the restoration of the San Marco monastery at a cost of 30,000 florins, and he didn't stop there. Dreaming of making Florence the most beautiful city in the world, he lavishly financed its development, contributing to restorations, including the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore. I know that in 50 years, the Medici will be driven out of Florence, but the buildings I have raised will stand, he told his friends. In total, having inherited around 100,000 florins from his father, Cosimo spent over 600,000 florins on construction in Florence over the next 36 years, while still leaving his heirs another 200,000. Lorenzo de' Medici, poet and leader. Yet this great legacy brought little peace. Giovanni's son Piero, plagued by gout, narrowly escaped death just 2 years into his rule. Piero's own son, Giuliano, was brutally murdered during Easter Mass inside the very cathedral the Medici had funded. Lorenzo, Giuliano's brother, rallied the outraged Florentines, hunted down the conspirators, and saw them punished. One of them turned out to be the Archbishop of Pisa. His execution outraged Pope Sixtus IV, who had supported the plot. In retaliation, the Pope excommunicated not only Lorenzo, but the entire city of Florence, seized Medici assets in Rome, annulled the bank's loans, including his own debt of 10,000 florins, and declared war on Florence with the backing of the King of Naples. At great personal risk, Lorenzo traveled to Naples, where he handed out generous gifts and promised 15 galleys for the war against the Turks. Naples sided with him, and Lorenzo returned to Florence a hero, effectively becoming its sole ruler. Lorenzo held a deep respect for the arts. He was a poet himself and turned the Medici Palace into one of the epicenters of the European Renaissance. Leonardo da Vinci visited there. The philosopher Pico della Mirandola took refuge there from the Inquisition. Botticelli, who grew up alongside Lorenzo and Giuliano, gratefully immortalized the Medici in his paintings. The young Michelangelo met Lorenzo in the gardens of San Marco, home to Italy's first art school, founded by the Medici. There, the boy carved a head of a faun from stone. Lorenzo admired the work, but remarked, "An old man can't have all his teeth." Michelangelo immediately corrected the oversight by chipping one out. Impressed, Lorenzo awarded him a scholarship and a room in the Medici Palace.
No longer bankers. Under Lorenzo's rule, the Medici Bank began to decline. More loans were being issued than payments collected, and the branches in London and Bruges were shut down due to heavy debts. At the same time, Florence's wool trade was weakening. Lorenzo partly covered expenses by dipping into the city's treasury, over the years appropriating more than 100,000 florins. After his death, the Medici family stopped earning and only spent. Power passed to his son, Piero, nicknamed the Unfortunate or the Foolish. Piero's political blunders made during the French King Charles VIII's campaign sparked public outrage. He was forced to flee Florence. That same year, the Medici Bank ceased to exist. Cosimo had once predicted that his family would be driven out in 50 years, but it had taken only 30. After Piero's death, the first pope? After Piero's death, leadership of the family passed to his brother, Giovanni, marking the start of the Medici's religious expansion. They were no longer famous bankers, but high-ranking Catholics and influential European statesmen. Even during Lorenzo's lifetime, he had secured a future for his son Giovanni by purchasing him the title of cardinal. Giovanni safeguarded the Medici fortune during their exile and, in 1500, moved to Rome, where his generosity and gentle nature quickly won him allies. Together with his brother Giuliano, he marched an army into Florence and restored Medici power by force. The very next year, the overweight Giovanni, whom many cardinals assumed wouldn't live long, was elected pope, taking the name Leo X. "God has given us the papacy, let us enjoy it," the unexpectedly robust Leo proclaimed. He acted decisively, appointing his cousin Giulio de' Medici as Archbishop of Florence, a man who would later become Pope Clement VII. Leo also granted the title of Duke of Urbino to his nephew, Lorenzo II. Lorenzo's daughter, Catherine de' Medici, would go on to become Queen of France and play a central role in the events of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, the mass killing of Protestants in Paris in 1572. From a younger branch of the family came Maria de' Medici, who married King Henry IV of France and became the mother of Louis XIII. Like all the Medici, Leo X was a patron of the arts. His favorite was Raphael, and he commissioned Michelangelo to create the Medici tombs in the church of San Lorenzo. to finance his lavish lifestyle and grand projects, such as the construction of St. Peter's Basilica. Leo X sold church offices and indulgences, granting forgiveness of sins. He died at the age of 45, leaving behind a mountain of debt and an empty treasury.
The second pope, the pontificate of Clement VII, the second Medici pope, lasted 11 years and was marked by disaster. Emperor Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire captured and sacked Rome. The Medici were once again driven out of Florence. In England, King Henry VIII, whose request for annulment the Pope refused, severed ties with the Roman Church. In 1530, after a 9-month siege, Clement restored Medici rule in Florence. The first duke was 19-year-old Alessandro de' Medici, nicknamed the Moor, the son of a black slave woman and Lorenzo II, or perhaps even of the Pope himself. Alessandro's brutal rule brought him down. He was assassinated by his own cousin, Lorenzino. Power then passed to the Medici's younger branch, led by Cosimo I. Clement VII died in 1534, and the outraged faithful remembered everything against him: the sack of Rome, his nepotism, his inept diplomacy, and his brazen use of the papacy as a tool of Medici dynastic ambition. Instead of mourning, the people of Rome celebrated and heaped insults upon his tomb. The lightning and the end. The next Medici pope was Pius IV, who used his time in office to grant cardinals' hats to relatives and secure lucrative positions for their children. The last Medici pope was Leo XI, nicknamed the Lightning, because his reign lasted only 27 days. The Medici line came to an end in 1737 with the death of the childless Grand Duke Gian Gastone. In his final years, he agreed to pass Tuscany to the Habsburg-Lorraine line on the condition that it be governed separately from the rest of the Habsburg domains. And so it was. As for how the Habsburgs became the most powerful dynasty in Europe and what ultimately brought about their downfall, you'll find that story in another episode of UZ. The link is in the description.